Australia will send a further $26.5 million in military aid for Ukraine in the form of anti-armor weapons and ammunition. Prime Minister Scott Morrison made the announcement on Friday as the first of 20, which include 2 ambulance variants, worth $50 million, were loaded into C-17 Globemasters. Mr. Morrison says he couldn't go into further detail about the new package at the behest of Ukrainian officials and Australia's partners, but it included capabilities that have proven critical on the battlefield so far. What it demonstrates is that our support continues and will continue, he said. I said they have our prayers, but they've also got our guns and ammunition. We have been able to redirect some of our supplies to the front lines in Ukraine to ensure they can continue the fight. The Bushmasters were painted olive green to suit the environment in Ukraine and will be fitted with radios, a global positioning system, and additional bolt-on armor to increase their protection. The personnel carriers provide protection against mines, artillery shrapnel, and small arms fire. A Ukrainian flag is painted on either side alongside the words, "United with Ukraine," stenciled in English and Ukrainian. Defence Minister Peter Dutton said Australia will continue to provide what military assistance it can to Ukraine. The idea would be to provide that support to keep people safe and to repel the Russians as quickly as possible from the Ukrainian territory, he told reporters. If there is a requirement to provide more support, Australia is prepared to consider all of that. He said the Bushmaster vehicles had proven their durability in battlefield conditions. It can move people around, particularly when we are seeing reports of Russian forces laying land mines, etc., he said. This will be a very crucial element of keeping troops safe. Ukraine's ambassador to Australia, Vasyl Miroshnichenko, said he thanked Australia on behalf of Mr. Zelensky and the Ukrainian people. It's going to be a great help to our military personnel in Ukraine, as well. There is 1 ambulance vehicle that will be extremely helpful, he told reporters. We do hope we will be able to force Russians out of the country, we can get back to normal lives and the reconstruction of the country. It comes a day after Foreign Minister Maurice Payne announced further sanctions against 67 Russian elites. The sanctions have been extended to Deputy Prime Minister Dmitry Grigorenko and military official Colonel General Mikhail Mizintsev, labeled the Butcher of Mariupol, for attacks against buildings sheltering civilians. The Kremlin retaliated overnight, imposing entry bans on 228 Australian government members, including Mr. Morrison and Mr. Dutton. But Mr. Dutton said Australia would continue to stand with Ukraine against tyranny and autocrats. People have fought and for the freedoms that we have in our country. We need to realize we just can't take for granted what we have, our system of democracy and freedom of speech, he said. These are values that dictators like Putin and Hitler and others will always be against. We need to stand up against them. Meanwhile, the United Nations voted to suspend Russia from the UN Human Rights Council, citing grave concern at the ongoing human rights and humanitarian crisis, before the Kremlin then quit the council. Mr. Morrison said it was an important move to ensure Russia continued to be held accountable for its invasion of Ukraine. Russia must pay a terrible and awful price for what they have done to Ukraine, he said. This was an important thing to do, to send a very strong message that any others that would want to act in this authoritarian way on their neighbours, including right here in this region, that Australia will always stand up. Senator Payne is in Brussels to meet with ministerial counterparts from other NATO countries and allies to discuss Russia's ongoing military assault. But the foreign minister is not going to expel the Russian ambassador for the time being. Having a diplomatic path to discuss these issues can be very important, Senator Payne told Sydney Radio 2 GB. I'm also conscious that there are hundreds and hundreds of Australians in Russia, many of whom will potentially reach out to our embassy for consular support. Labor has urged the government to expel all Russian diplomats, barring the ambassador, to hold the Kremlin accountable for reported atrocities. With